My name is Nadia Carmichael. I'm 34 years old. On the 14th of October, a Tuesday night at 10:17 in the evening, my husband of 6 years leaned toward a woman in our downstairs hallway and whispered 4 words he believed only she could hear. "She's finally asleep." He meant our 4-month-old daughter, Ella, who had just gone down after 45 minutes of rocking in the nursery directly above. He thought I was in the bath. He thought the house was his for the next few hours. He thought the Nana baby monitor he had installed himself on the nursery wall with such pride back in April was just a camera for the two of us, a sweet digital window into her daughter's sleep. What he did not know was that his mother, Ruth Ann Carmichael, 61 years old, retired librarian, was sitting in her living room in Greenville, South Carolina at that exact moment with her iPad open to the Nanit app, watching her daughter's chest rise and fall in the soft darkness the way she did most evenings because it gave her peace she couldn't find any other way since her husband passed. What he did not know was that Ruth Ann recognized her son's voice the instant she heard it, and that she recognized, just as instantly, that the second voice in our hallway was not mine. What he most certainly did not know was that she pressed the record button and held it steady for 47 seconds. And then opened a family WhatsApp group with 11 members and sent that audio file with one line of text beneath it. 11 members, my mother, his aunts, his grandmother, his brother and his brother's wife, all of them. I didn't cry when I found out. I didn't scream. I walked downstairs at 10:42 that same night, poured myself a glass of water from the kitchen tap, and looked at Derek standing in our kitchen, and I smiled at him. He smiled back, easy and unbothered. He had no idea. He had no idea that 47 seconds of his own voice had already begun to travel through 11 phones while he stood there in our kitchen in Savannah, Georgia, holding his glass of whiskey with 2 fingers the way he always did when he was relaxed. He had no idea I had been quietly building the exit he didn't know he was going to need me to have for 8 full weeks before that night. He had no idea I had already retained a family law attorney on Bull Street. He had no idea I had already opened a business account with $17,240 in it that he had never seen and could not touch. What they didn't know was that I had stopped waiting to be seen and started building something instead. This is that story. Derek and I met in the spring of 2016 at a networking event in Charleston, South Carolina. I was 26 years old, a marketing coordinator for a regional hotel chain. Wearing a blazer I had ironed 4 times that morning and rehearsing talking points to myself in the elevator on the way up to the function room. He was 30, a financial analyst with a firm called Hargrove Capital, easy in a crowded room in the way that people who have never had to try to be easy tend to be. He was holding a glass of wine with 2 fingers and laughing at exactly the right moments without it looking performed. He introduced himself with a handshake that lasted a beat longer than strictly necessary, and a smile that told me he had already decided, in some confident and comfortable way, how the rest of the evening was going to go. I told myself I found his confidence irritating. I went home and thought about him for 3 days before I admitted it wasn't irritating at all. We dated for 2 years in the easy, unhurried way that the best relationships sometimes begin. Road trips to the Georgia coast, his apartment in Charleston, my apartment in Savannah, the kind of back-and-forth rhythm that makes a city feel like a backdrop rather than a place you're stuck in. In August of 2018, he proposed on the back porch of a rented cottage in Tybee Island, the water visible from where we were sitting, a ring that was simpler than I expected and exactly right for it, a thin gold band with a single oval sapphire, nothing that performed, quietly and specifically chosen. I said yes without thinking. We married in May of the following year at a small ceremony on the grounds of a historic inn just outside of Savannah. 62 guests. An arch covered in white ranunculus, the kind of afternoon that still stops me when I come across photographs of it in my phone. The quality of the light, the ease on everyone's faces, how certain the whole day looked. I want to be careful and honest about Derek, because the honest version of this story is more complicated than the villain version, and I think you deserve the complicated one. For several years he was genuinely good, patient, present, mostly. Dry in his humor in a way that didn't play to the room but landed quietly between 2 people in a car or at a kitchen table. When my father had a minor cardiac event in 2020 and I drove from Savannah to Augusta without stopping, Derek followed 2 hours later. sat in the waiting room with my mother through the night, brought her coffee from the vending machine at the end of the corridor without being asked, and never once mentioned it afterward as evidence of what kind of man he was. That is a real thing he did. I am not making this easier on myself or on this story. I am telling you what was true. What was also true is that Derek changed after Hargrove Capital promoted him to senior analyst in January of 2022. The promotion came with a 31% salary increase, a corner office in their Savannah headquarters on Bay Street, and, as it turned out, a degree of self-importance that had not been visible before, not in those particular concentrations. The changes were small at first. He stopped asking about my work. By then I had been at Brightwell Properties for 4 years, building their marketing operation from near-zero regional recognition into a genuine presence across 3 different markets. I was proud of what I had built there, and I had earned the right to be. Derek used to ask me about campaigns, about client pitches, about the teams I was managing through difficult cycles. After January of 2022, the questions simply stopped arriving. Not dramatically. Gradually, the way water doesn't vanish but recedes. Then came the comments, not cruel ones. The correcting kind. The kind that arrive wearing the costume of a joke so that when you name them, you are the one being oversensitive. Once, at a dinner with 4 of his Hargrove colleagues at a restaurant on Drayton Street, I mentioned a client acquisition strategy I had led that quarter. And Derek said, with an easy laugh and a hand wave dismissively through the air, "She makes it sound more dramatic than it is. It's basically just posting on Instagram." 3 of the 4 colleagues laughed. I did not react. I moved the conversation forward with a smile and talked to the colleague to my left about something else entirely. In the car on the drive home, I waited until we were past the Forsyth Park lights and then said, quietly, "Don't do that again." He said, "Do what?" I was joking. I said, "I know. Don't do it again." He did it again in a different room with different words and the same shape underneath. Corinne Haas joined Hargrove Capital in March of 2023 as a junior portfolio analyst. She was 29 years old. I met her exactly once, at the firm's annual summer gathering at a country club on the edge of Savannah in August of that year, 2023. She was tall, sharp-featured, pleasant in an effortful way that I registered without quite having a name for yet. Derek introduced us with a casual sweep that communicated nothing specific about how 2 people knew each other beyond sharing a floor of an office building. She said, "He talks about you and the baby constantly." I said, "All good things, I hope." She said, "Only." She held my gaze for a moment after she said it, something assessing in it that I filed away without examining. 3 months later, she would be standing in my downstairs hallway at 10:17 on a Tuesday night. When I became pregnant in January of 2023, Derek was happy. Unmistakably, genuinely happy, the kind that isn't performed because there is no need to perform when the feeling is real. He painted the nursery himself over a long weekend in March. A soft sage green I had chosen from a paint swatch card that he took to the hardware store 3 separate times to get exactly right under different lighting conditions. He attended every prenatal appointment, always first through the door, sitting forward in the plastic chair, asking questions I had not thought to ask, writing down the answers in his phone. He assembled the crib from a flat-pack box on a Sunday afternoon and swore twice and then apologized quietly to my stomach for the language. I watched him through those months with something close to relief, thinking that perhaps the version of my husband that had arrived with the promotion had been a temporary distortion, that the man I had married was finding his way back to himself. Ella Frances Carmichael arrived on the 5th of June, 2023. 6 pounds, 11 ounces. A full head of dark hair that no one in the delivery room could stop touching. Derek cried when they placed her on my chest, and I had not expected that, and regardless of everything that came after that moment, I will not hold it against him. The first weeks home were disorienting in the specific way that new parenthood always is, sleepless and unmapped. The hours blurring into each other and then suddenly sharpening into moments of such concentrated tenderness that you forget what tired means. In August, 2 months after Ella arrived, Derek sat across from me at the kitchen island one evening while she slept upstairs and suggested I not return to Brightwell after my maternity leave ended. "I make enough for both of us now," he said. "You'd be handing Ella to someone who doesn't know her for 40 hours a week. What's the point?" I told him I liked my work. I told him I had spent 4 years building something real at Brightwell, and that I was good at it. He said, "Of course you are. But think about what she actually needs right now, not what you want." I did not argue. I did not agree. I went quiet in the way I go quiet when I am thinking something I am not yet ready to say out loud. Something I need to examine from several sides before it becomes a decision. 3 weeks later, I submitted my resignation from Brightwell Properties. I told Derek it had been my choice. It was. What I did not tell him was what I had already decided to do instead, and in which direction all of that energy was going to flow. The baby monitor was Derek's idea from beginning to end, which I have thought about many times since. He researched it himself in April before Ella arrived, ordered a Nadia Pro with two-way audio, continuous overnight recording, and a family access feature allowing up to 10 additional viewers through the app. He installed it on the nursery wall on a Saturday morning, connected it to our home Wi-Fi, walked me through every feature with the focused enthusiasm of a man who has found his competence expressed through a piece of technology. He was proud of it. Then, in late June, when Ella was 3 weeks old and still the most astonishing thing either of us had seen in our respective 30 years on Earth, his mother called from Greenville and asked, gently, whether she might be able to check in on the baby remotely sometimes. Derek thought it was the sweetest thing he had ever heard. He sat at the kitchen table that same evening, opened the Nadia app on his phone, created a shared viewing link, and sent it to the family WhatsApp group with the message, "Here she is, y'all. Miss Ella Francis, live and in color." His mother Ruzanne replied with 7 heart emojis. My mother Phyllis sent a voice note of herself weeping so genuinely that I had to step outside to listen to it without laughing. His brother Paul sent a single thumbs up, which is Paul. His grandmother Edna sent 3 separate messages because she had registered under 2 different email addresses and could not remember which one she had used for the group. It was, in that moment, entirely an uncomplicated sweet. What Derek had not thought through, because Derek consistently stopped thinking through things once he had finished setting them up, was that the Nadia Pro microphone has an audio pickup range of approximately 22 feet and operates on a sensitivity setting he had left at its maximum during installation and had never once revisited. Our nursery sits on the 2nd floor at the top of the staircase in a house built in 1941. The floor's original heart pine with the natural acoustic properties of old wood in an old frame, meaning that voices in the hallway directly below carry upward with almost no attenuation, particularly voices in close proximity to the source. He also had not thought about the fact that Ruth Ann Carmichael, who had been a light sleeper since she lost her husband 3 years prior, had the Nadia app open on her iPad almost every evening by 10 o'clock because watching Ella breathe in the blue-lit darkness of the nursery camera was the one thing that reliably settled her. On the 14th of October at 10:14 in the evening, Ruth Ann opened the Nadia app in her living room in Greenville. Ella was on her back in the crib, perfectly still, chest rising and falling in the white noise dark. Ruth Ann turned the volume up slightly. She liked the sound of it. At 10:17, she heard her son's voice through the speaker. Close. Deliberately low. As unmistakably his as his face. "She's finally asleep." A pause that lasted perhaps 2 full seconds. Then a second voice, a woman's voice, equally low, positioned close enough to the nursery floor that she must have been standing directly beneath it in the hallway. "Finally. I've been waiting here for an hour." Then Derek's voice again, lower still. "I know, come here." Ruth Ann sat without moving in her living room chair for 12 seconds. She told me later she counted them. Then she pressed record. She held the button for 47 seconds. She did not call Derek. She did not call me. At 10:23, she opened the family WhatsApp group, attached the audio file, and typed one line beneath it. "I don't know what this is, but somebody needs to." Then she put the iPad on the cushion beside her and sat in the dark without moving for a long time. If you are still with me right now, I want you to pause for just a moment. Drop a comment below and tell me this: would you have gone downstairs that night? Would you have opened that door and made it a scene right then? Because what I did instead changed everything about how this story ended. Please also subscribe if you haven't yet. Every person who stays to the end of these stories is the reason they keep getting told, and you deserve to know what comes next. I found out at 6:48 the next morning. Ella woke just before 7 as she always did, and I had already been sitting in the rocking chair beside her crib for 20 minutes, phone face down in my lap when it buzzed against my palm. A message from my mother Phyllis in a private thread separate from the family group. Call me before you do anything. I mean it, Nadia. Before you do anything at all. I opened the family group chat and scrolled upward. Ruth Ann's message was time-stamped 10:23. The audio file beneath it showed 62 listens. 62 separate people had pressed play on that file through the night, while I slept 12 feet above the hallway where it had been recorded. I did not play the audio immediately. I sat in the rocking chair with Ella against my chest, her weight warm and steady, her breathing even against my shoulder, and I looked at the ceiling for a long time. Then I placed her in the crib, walked to the bathroom, turned the shower on, sat down on the tile floor of the shower with my back against the wall, and played the audio 3 times through with the water running above me. I listened to it the first time with my eyes closed, the second time with my eyes open at the wall. The third time I listened for the background sounds, the specific place in the hallway where they were standing, the acoustic signature of my own home around my husband's voice. Then I stood up. I washed my face. I got dressed. I went downstairs. Derek was at the kitchen island with his coffee and his phone. He looked up when I came in. Morning. She sleep okay? Fine, I said. You? He glanced at his phone and then back at me. Good, yeah, fine. His notifications were turned off. He had no idea. I watched him butter his toast with the unhurried ease of a man who believes the morning belongs to him. And I understood something in that moment that arrived with the specific and quiet clarity. This was not the beginning of something. This was the confirmation of something I had already been moving around the edges of for 8 weeks, without allowing myself to name it in plain language. Because here is what Derek did not know. 6 weeks before, on the 4th of September, I had gone through the inside pocket of his jacket looking for a restaurant receipt I needed for our shared household expense tracker. What I found instead was a folded cocktail napkin from a wine bar called Olive and Vine on Whitaker Street, a phone number in handwriting I did not recognize, and a single initial. C. I stood in our bedroom doorway holding that napkin for 4 full minutes. I took a photograph of it on my phone, centered and focused and clearly lit. I refolded it on the same crease and returned it to the same pocket in the same position. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stood at the sink looking out at the backyard for a long time. Over the 6 weeks that followed, I did not confront Derek. I watched. I am a marketer by training and instinct, which means that reading behavioral pattern shifts without the subject knowing they are being read is not a skill I had to develop specially. I tracked his patterns carefully without letting him see that I was tracking anything at all. The late evenings that began occurring without explanation on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The phone that went face down on every flat surface the moment he sat down somewhere comfortable. The name Corinne that I glimpsed once for approximately 3 seconds in an open text thread on his screen, before he shifted the angle away. On the 18th of September, I called a family law attorney named Margaret Osei, whose office was on Bull Street in Savannah. I had her name from a quiet referral from a woman I trusted, who had navigated her own separation with clear eyes and no public drama. I made the appointment under my maiden name, Nadia Waverly. On a Thursday afternoon, I sat in a leather chair in her second-floor office overlooking a square full of low autumn sun and Spanish moss, and I laid out what I had and what I suspected in clear, sequential order. Margaret Osei was 62 years old, silver-haired, unhurried in the specific way of a woman who has listened to complicated things for a very long time and is no longer surprised by any of them. She listened without writing for the first 10 minutes. Then she opened a legal pad and did not put her pen down for 45 minutes. We talked about the house, about assets, about the business account I had already opened, about Ella, about Georgia law on joint property and what a filing would look like and what a settlement could realistically contain. When I left her office that Thursday afternoon, I walked down the stairs to Bull Street and stood in the late September light for a moment before I got into my car. I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Solid. Like ground beneath my feet that I had put there myself. Because here is the other thing Derek did not know. When I resigned from Brightwell Properties in September, I did not simply resign. I redirected. In the weeks before I submitted that letter, working in 20-minute increments during Ella's nap times on the laptop I kept in the nursery. I had registered a business through the Georgia Secretary of State's office, Waverly Interiors LLC. I had spent 14 years developing expertise in real estate marketing and specifically in the staging and presentation dimension of it, the side that lives at the intersection of design instinct and market strategy. I had 2 paying clients before my last day at Brightwell, both referred by former colleagues, both real projects at professional rates. By the 3rd week of October, I had 4 active clients and a 5th in preliminary conversation. I had a business account at a bank Derek had never entered and had no knowledge of. The balance on the morning of the 15th of October was $17,240. I had also, in full consultation with Margaret O.C. and within the framework of my legal rights under Georgia marital property law, moved a portion of our joint savings into that account. I want to be exact about what that means. I did not take Derek's money. I took half of ours. The law and my attorney both agreed on where that line was. I stayed precisely on the correct side of it. That morning, after Derek left for work and Ella was down for her first nap of the day, I called my mother. Phyllis Waverly, 58 years old, retired school administrator, the woman who has answered her phone on the first ring for every call I have made since I was 8 years old, regardless of what else was happening in her life. She answered before the first ring finished. I heard it, I said. I know, she said. What do you need? I told her. She did not ask me to slow down or reconsider or think about what I might be throwing away. She said, "Tell me what I can do." That is my mother. I also called Ruth Ann Carmichael that afternoon. I want you to hold that in your mind for a moment. Ruth Ann had heard her son's voice in that recording as clearly as anyone. She had recognized it immediately. She had made a choice at 10:23 on a Tuesday night to share it with 11 people rather than to call Derek directly and give him a chance to manage the story before it traveled. I have never asked her directly why she made that choice instead of the other one, but when I called her that afternoon, her voice was tired in a way that sounded more like confirmation than shock, like something had finally been named that had been gathering weight without a name for some time. "I'm sorry," she said, and she meant it in the specific way you mean it when you realize you should have said it sooner, not when you are simply the bearer of something terrible. "Don't be sorry," I told her. "You did the right thing." A pause. "I'll be there on Friday," she said. I told her she did not have to make the drive. She said, "I know I don't have to." She arrived Friday morning with a full casserole dish and a list in her head of what she was prepared to help with. She stayed for 4 days and did not waste a single hour of them. Derek came home that same Tuesday evening behaving exactly as he always did. I need you to hold that image carefully. He came through the door at 6:45, loosened his tie at the collar, went directly to Ella and kissed her on the top of her head, poured himself a small glass of whiskey, and asked whether I had eaten dinner. I said yes. I told him I was tired. He offered to do Ella's bedtime. He carried her upstairs and I sat in the living room and listened to him singing to her, the small, tuneless, specific song he had made up in the delivery room and had sung every night since. Something about the moon and the dark and sleeping sound. I sat and I listened to him sing it, and I thought about the kind of person who can sing a child to sleep with their full voice and their full presence while the rest of their life is beginning to come apart at the seams. I did not feel anger in that moment. I felt something colder and cleaner. Certainty. Over the following 6 weeks, I executed every step of the framework Margaret Osei had laid out. I gathered documentation with the same focused patience I had once applied to campaign audits. Bank records, screenshots from my phone, dated and clear, the image of the cocktail napkin, time-stamped, a photograph I had taken on the 3rd of October of a silver Audi A4 parked in front of our house at 8:40 in the evening, while Derek was supposed to be on a client call in his home office, the license plate fully visible and sharp. I did not change my behavior toward Derek. I did not become distant, did not become strange, did not offer him anything to read in my face. I continued making dinner, managing Ella's schedule, attending a neighborhood block gathering on the 22nd, smiling at the right moments and meaning nothing by any of it. I met with Margaret 3 additional times through October. We finalized the filing framework. I had chosen my date deliberately. Ella's christening had been on the calendar since August. Planned for the 12th of November, a Sunday. 60 guests. Derek's full family. My full family. The couple from next door, who were to be Ella's godparents. The pastor who had known both of us since our wedding. A brunch reception afterward at a venue on the edge of Forsyth Park that we had booked together in September. I had placed the cake order. I had chosen the flowers. Cream and dusty rose, understated and right. I had Ella's dress ready, a white christening gown from my grandmother that had been taken in at the shoulders to fit her small frame. I was going to attend that christening fully and completely and without a single visible crack. And at the brunch afterward, with 60 witnesses in the room, I was going to let what I had already set in motion arrive at its own pace. Derek still had not mentioned the audio file. 47 seconds of his own voice in his own hallway had traveled through 11 phones and an iPad in Greenville, and he had said nothing to me about it. His mother had called him once during those weeks, a brief call I heard him take standing in the garage with the door pulled nearly shut, his voice dropping to a murmur I could not follow from where I stood. I did not try to follow it. What I noticed was that after that call he was quieter at the dinner table. He had begun looking at me in a new and particular way in the evenings, something assessing in it, as though he was trying to find something specific in my face and was not finding it. Which was correct because I was not putting it there. 2 nights before the christening, he sat down across from me at the kitchen table after Ella was asleep and folded his hands in front of him with the deliberate steadiness of a man who has rehearsed this. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. I set my coffee mug down. I looked at him. "Okay," I said. He stared at his hands for a moment. Then he said, "I made a serious mistake. It's over. I ended it 2 weeks ago." He looked up at me. It was Corinne. He said her name as though it cost him something specific to say it out loud to me. He waited for me to break open. I didn't. "I know," I said. He blinked. "You know?" "Yes." He waited for more and I gave him nothing more at all. I picked up my mug and said, "Ella has a pediatrician appointment at 9 in the morning. I need you home by 8, and I walked upstairs. I left him sitting at the kitchen table in a silence that had weight, and I did not look back once. He did not sleep well that night. I heard him downstairs at 2 in the morning and again at 3:45, the quiet, percussive sound of a man who has begun to understand something at the worst possible time and cannot find anywhere to put that understanding. I slept 6 hours, dreamless. In the morning I made breakfast as I had done 1,000 mornings before, set it on the table, and watched him eat it without speaking while he looked at me across the table like a man searching for a door in a room he had just realized has no walls. The 12th of November was cold and clear in the specific way Savannah sometimes gets in November. The light low and lateral, the Spanish moss in the squares catching the angle of it, the whole city looking like something that has aged particularly and deliberately well. Ella wore her great-grandmother's christening gown, white against her dark hair, the lace collar perfectly framing her face. She slept through the first 20 minutes of the service in the church, and then woke at the precise moment the water touched her forehead, opened her eyes fully, and regarded the pastor with the focused and unimpressed calm of someone who has seen this before. The room laughed softly. I held her steady against my shoulder and did not let her feel a single thing I was carrying. At the brunch afterward, 60 people filled the venue on the edge of Forsyth Park with warmth and noise and the particular ease of people who love each other and have been given a reason to be in the same room. Derek's mother, Ruth Ann, was already there when we arrived. She took Ella from my arms and held her for the first 20 minutes without putting her down, and did not make direct eye contact with Derek for the first 45. My mother Phyllis stayed close to me. She refilled my water glass twice without being asked, which is how she expresses what she cannot say out loud in a room full of people. I noticed both things. I suspected others noticed at least one of them. At 12:47, after the food had been served and the christening cake had been cut and passed around, Derek stood and tapped his glass. He had not told me he planned to speak. I sat very still. He thanked the guests, thanked the pastor, thanked the godparents. He said several genuine and warm things about Ella, about being her father, about what it meant to watch her arrive in the world. I believed every word of that part. Then he looked at me directly. He said, "And most of all, I want to thank my wife Nadia, who is the strongest and most patient woman in this room. I don't deserve her." He paused, something flickering behind his eyes that I recognized as a last attempt to reach me in front of everyone. The room made the soft, appreciative sound rooms make when a man is being modestly charming about his good fortune. I watched it happen. I watched Derek look down at his glass and then back at me, asking something with his eyes that I was not going to answer in that room, in front of those people, in that particular moment. Ruth Ann's glass did not lift during the toast, neither did my mother's. Neither did Jean's. 11 people in this room of 60 had been on that family group chat. 11 people had listened to 47 seconds of audio in the middle of the night. Every single one of them was in this room watching Derek stand and speak about his wife's strength and patience, while those 47 seconds sat like a stone at the center of the most carefully arranged day this family had organized in years. When the applause settled, I stood up. I had not planned to speak. Or perhaps I had always planned to speak and had simply been waiting for the words to arrive at their own time. The room went quiet immediately with the specific quality of attention that appears when something is about to happen that was not on the program. I held Ella against my shoulder and I looked at the room. Not at Derek. I looked at Ruth Ann, whose chin lifted almost imperceptibly. I looked at my mother, whose hands were folded quietly on the table. I looked at Paul, who was studying the tablecloth. I looked at Jean, who was watching me with her full and unmoving attention. I said, "I want to say something too." I said, "I want to thank everyone in this room who chose to see clearly when it would have been easier not to. There are people here who looked directly at a hard truth and did not look away from it. The fact that my daughter is surrounded from her very first months by people who are willing to do that is the greatest thing I could have wished for her." I held Ruth Ann's gaze when I said that. Her eyes were bright. Then I said, "I also want you all to know that as of Monday morning I will be filing for divorce." The room went absolutely still, the kind of still that has physical presence and weight that you can feel on your skin. Ella is going to be raised by two parents who are completely honest with her about what love looks like and what it doesn't. I think that is the most important thing I can give her. I sat back down. Ella made a small, contented sound against my shoulder. I adjusted her gently and pressed my lips to the top of her head and did not look at Derek. I did not need to look at him. I could feel the shape of what was happening in the room without looking at any particular person. A chair shifted at the far table. Someone at the corner exhaled slowly. I heard my mother set her glass down with the soft, precise click of a decision that had already been made. Ruth Ann stood from her chair, walked the full length of the venue in silence without looking at anyone, and sat down in the empty seat beside me. She placed her hand over mine on the table. She did not say a single word, that was all. A grandmother walking across a room and sitting down beside the woman her son had betrayed, making the simplest possible statement of where she stood, with her body, in front of 60 people without a single syllable. There was no drama in it. There didn't need to be. Derek did not speak during any of this. I looked at him once after Ruth Ann sat beside me, and I held his gaze for 3 full seconds. He was the particular color a face becomes when it has been found out in front of every person it has ever needed to impress in its entire life. He was holding his champagne flute in both hands, not drinking from it, not moving it. He looked at me and I did not perform a single thing for him. Not anger, not sorrow, not satisfaction. I was simply finished. He looked away first. Margaret O.C. filed the paperwork at 9:17 on Monday morning. By Wednesday of that same week, I had received the first communication from Derek's attorney, a man named Patrick Rentz, measured and professional, evidently already informed about the 60 witnesses who had been present the preceding Sunday. Derek's first direct call to me was brief. He said, "We should talk before this goes any further." I said, "Margaret is the right person to talk to. She is available Thursday." He said my name the way people say it when they want it to function as a rope. "Nadia." I said, "Thursday?" I ended the call and set my phone on the counter and went to check on Ella. Corinne Haas had already left Hargrove Capital before the christening. She had given 2 weeks' notice on the 4th of November, a week before Derek told me in our kitchen that it was over. She relocated to Atlanta. I know this because it emerged through the attorney process and not because I looked for it. That chapter has nothing in it that belongs to me. Derek moved into a short-term rental on the east side of Savannah in late November. He came for Ella on Tuesdays and every other Saturday, prompt and prepared and consistent, doing the work of being a present father with a seriousness that I observed without comment, and gave him quiet, private credit for. We communicated entirely through Our Family Wizard, an application designed specifically for co-parents, every message documented, tone calibrated to neutral by the structure of the platform. He respected the format. Twice in the early weeks he attempted to have a conversation outside the app, once at a driveway handoff, once in a personal text. Both times I redirected to the app without commentary or emotion. Boundaries are not punishments. They are architecture. They tell you where the walls are so you stop walking into them in the dark and calling it bad luck. By December, Waverly Interiors had 6 active clients and a 7th in negotiation. I moved the business into a small studio on Jones Street, $1,200 a month on a month-to-month lease. A long work table in the center of the room where I could spread fabric samples and floor plans and mood boards, while Ella slept in a portable crib by the window. My former Brightwell colleague Andy came on as a part-time project manager, sharp and practical. Someone who understood the work and asked the right questions. We were building something real, something modest, something that was entirely mine in a way that nothing had been entirely mine in the 6 years of my marriage. In January, 3 months after the christening, Derek and I sat across from each other in a mediator's office on Liberty Street. We reached a settlement in 4 sessions across 2 weeks. I kept the house. The division of assets was fair in the specific way fairness looks when it has been structured by 2 people who are no longer interested in fighting and are only interested in clarity. Child support was established and structured. Custody was joint, the schedule built around Ella's needs and nothing else. We signed on a Wednesday afternoon in February. When it was done, we walked out of the building side by side and stood on the sidewalk in the winter light for a moment. He said, "I'm sorry. For all of it." I said, "I know." He said, "I mean it, Nadia." I said, "I believe you." And then there was nothing left to add to that. Belief is not a door reopening. It is acknowledgement. It is the beginning of 2 people moving on from the same place in different directions. We said goodbye and walked to our separate cars, and that was what the end looked like. Not a scene, not a performance, just 2 people on a sidewalk in the winter, going in opposite directions, both of them changed. Here is what I have learned and what I want to leave with you. I did not always handle this with the grace I have described. There were nights after Ella was asleep when I sat at the kitchen table in the dark with the lights off and let myself feel the full weight of what I had lost. Not the marriage I was ending, but the marriage I had believed I was in. The version of Derek I had genuinely loved. The future I had been building in complete good faith. That grief does not dissolve because you made the right decisions. It does not respect your strategy or your dignity. It arrives on its own schedule. Grief and clarity are not opposites. You can carry both simultaneously. You have to carry both, actually, if you want to come through the other side as yourself, and not as a performance of someone who has it together. The performance of calm and the actual thing are different from each other. The performance exhausts you because it costs energy to maintain. The real thing is structural. It supports weight. It held me through 8 weeks of building in silence while the person sleeping next to me had no idea what I was constructing in the margins of the life we appeared to share. When you stop reacting and start preparing, you are not suppressing anything. You are choosing. You are deciding that you will not spend yourself on the theater of being hurt when you could be building the next thing instead. That is not coldness. That is not a lack of feeling. It is the most powerful form of feeling I've ever known. The kind that turns grief into direction. Ruth Ann comes to Savannah twice a month now. We drink coffee on Friday mornings at the kitchen table while Ella plays on the living room rug between us, pulling at everything within reach, studying her own hands with the focused intensity of someone conducting important research. Ruth Ann and I do not speak about Derek directly when we are together. She mentions Ella sometimes in the context of him, a gesture she makes with her left hand that she says he made as a small boy. An expression at moments of intense concentration that she recognizes from years of watching him grow up. I let that be what it is. a grandmother finding her grandchild in the child. There is nothing wrong with that. It is simply true, and I have no desire to take it from either of them. The baby monitor in the nursery is still there. I still use it every night. I left it on its original settings, the same audio sensitivity Derek configured during installation, the same shared access link he sent to the family group chat on a June evening when Ella was 3 weeks old, and the world was still the shape it had been. Ruth Ann still checks the feed some evenings when she cannot sleep. I think about that sometimes, about the thing that was set up with love and pride and the best of intentions, and about how it turned out to be the exact instrument that protected my daughter from a life built on a dishonest foundation. You cannot construct a life on deception and expect the tools of love to remain silent indefinitely. They have long memories. Eventually, they speak. If you are watching this and you are somewhere in the middle of a truth you have not yet allowed yourself to name, I want to leave you with this one thing. Stop performing calm and start building it. Because there is a difference between the two that is everything. The performance costs you. The real thing holds you. It held me through 8 weeks of silent preparation, while the person who had broken my trust slept peacefully in the next room. Identify the one step you can take today. Not tomorrow. Today. It does not need to be visible. The most important work I did in those 8 weeks was completely invisible to the one person who most needed not to see it. Build in silence. Let the room fill up around you at the right time. The right witnesses will be there when it matters. What I want to ask you, before I go, is this. At what point would you have broken the silence? Would it have been the night of the recording? The morning after, when you heard 62 plays on an audio file? Or would you have sat with it the way I did, and let it become something larger and more true than a single confrontation could ever have been? Leave me a comment and tell me. Tell me where you are in your own story, if you are in one. And if this found you at the right moment, share it with someone who needs to hear it. You already know exactly who that person is. To Ella, if she finds her way to this someday, you are surrounded from your very first weeks by people who refuse to look away when it would have been easier to. Your grandmother sat with her iPad in the dark because she loved you. Your mother built something in silence because she loved you more than she loved her own comfort or her own peace of mind. Every decision was for the solid ground you deserve to stand on. I hope it holds you long after I am gone. To every one of you who chose to stay until the very end of this story, I want to say something that I mean without qualification. You are the reason these stories exist. Every comment, every share, every person who pressed play on a quiet evening because they needed to hear something true. You are the witness that every woman in these stories deserved and didn't always get in real time. When you show up for these stories, you are showing up for the woman who was underestimated in her own home, who was mistaken for smaller than she was, who built something real in 20-minute increments while someone else slept. You are her audience now. That matters. I am grateful for every single one of you. If you are new here, please subscribe so that next week's story finds you. Share this one with someone who is standing at a crossroads and does not yet know which direction leads to ground. They will thank you. I will see you next week.